The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So hello everybody, welcome to our webinar. This is how P2 assistance providers can effectively use social media. So we have a packed agenda today. We have 3 great speakers. We also have a lot of people registered for this webinar. So I think in this beginning introduction, I'm just going to go over a few ground rules and logistics. And hopefully, more people will be joining in the next few minutes before we actually start the webinar. So you should see my screen. This is the web page where we will post a recording of today's session as well as the PowerPoint presentations from each of our presenters. So starting tomorrow, you can come back here and gain access to the PowerPoint presentations, to the recording, and then if you have any other questions, just let us know. But you'll receive an email, I think it's from Namoa office, that gives you these same instructions. And if you have any comments or feedback, it has a link for you to send your comments to us. So we appreciate any feedback. So today, the purpose of the webinar is to talk about social media and Web 2.0 technologies, and in particularly how P2 and assistance programs can use these technologies to help their program. So our presenters are going to be talking about their experiences using social media, share tips on what has been successful, what other programs are doing, and discuss some of the options available, because certain technologies may work better for certain audiences and things like that. So, hopefully this webinar will kind of give you an overview of the social media technologies available and maybe provide some information on how you can use it. So I am going to start this session with a poll. And so this, just take a few seconds to answer the poll to your best ability. And this will also help give our presenters an idea of the types of tools that people are familiar with so that they can better tailor their presentation as we go along today. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and initiate the second poll for today. And I can share the results of this actually. So these are the poll results. You can see that on a personal level, a lot of people are using Facebook, LinkedIn, and to a smaller extent, YouTube, Twitter, and blogs, things like that. Okay, and the second poll is really the same question. This time it's focusing on what types of social media applications you use professionally. So if you just want to take a few seconds and fill out this poll, that would be appreciated. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and then share the results with everybody. Okay, so you can see on a professional basis, most people are using, well, LinkedIn is the most popular social media application, and to a lesser extent, some people are using Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and blogs. So our last poll for today is going to talk about, if you don't use social media, what might be some of the reasons that you don't? So again, take a few seconds to answer this, so it would be really helpful. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this last poll and then share the results. Okay, so it seems that about half of you that have responded either can't access it at work, or maybe you don't have the time to access it at work. And some of you don't know how to use the technology. This isn't, we're not going to really go into the nuts and bolts of how to use some of these things, but we'll provide a brief overview, so it might get you a little more familiar with it. Okay, so that's all the questions that I have. As a reminder, this website is where you're going to go to access the PowerPoint presentations and access the recording of today's webinar, so you can do that tomorrow. Also, we do have time for questions at the end of today's session, but we'll be taking some questions at the end of each presentation as well. So if you want to utilize the question box in the right-hand corner of your screen, you can type your questions there, and then once the presenter finishes, we'll be able to facilitate them. And we'll also have some time at the very end to ask additional questions as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first presenter. Our first presenter is Laura Barnes, and she's a librarian with the Illinois Sustainable Technology Center. And she has a lot of experience using social media, working with different websites and tools and resources for providing information and networking with people. So two of the resources that she has created are noted on her bio on the website here, and the first is the Environmental News Bits blog, and the second is the Social Media LibGuide. So I would suggest, maybe after today's webinar, you might want to check out those resources as well. And I'm going to go ahead and turn over the controls to Laura. So Laura, you're going to get a prompt to be the presenter. And you can take it from here.
Okay, I'm just making sure that I'm reading everything and understanding. Okay, all right. So the first question I normally ask when I taught this workshop face-to-face is how many people are using social media in their organizations? But I know that already because Rachel did the nice poll. So thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that. So social media has pluses and minuses. There are lots of benefits. It can be powerful, persuasive, creative, timely, informative, speedy, and transformative. There's also a downside. It can be time-consuming, repetitive, narcissistic, inane, and my favorite, time-sucking. And it really can be a time sink. But the reality is that social media is where the people are. So why does social media matter? I'm going to be showing the first part of this talk is going to be a lot of statistics. Most of them come from the Pew Internet and American Life Project. Trying to get current statistics is really like hitting a moving target. So some things may be a little old, but for example, this chart here shows change in Internet usage by age from 2000 to 2010. I think you can safely assume that those percentages have all increased since this poll was last taken. Nearly 80% of adults 18 and older are online. I obviously am a librarian, so I'm aware of what's going on in the library world. Libraries are being slammed by people who need Internet access to research and apply for jobs or apply for government assistance. Teens are even more connected. 93% of them use the Internet. And for most teenagers, particularly young teenagers, I mean, the Internet is, I mean, it's just a way of life. They've always had it. There's never not been an Internet. Of those online, at least 70% are using social media of some sort. It would be irresponsible not to respond to this trend. My friend Rick Yoder, who is also a part of the P2RX group, has a great line about that. He says, unless you want to be the Amish of the information landscape, you really need to be doing this. People use social media. YouTube back in June was exceeding 3 billion views per day, and they have 48 hours of video uploaded every minute. So if you spent all your time watching YouTube, you'd never see everything. Facebook is 43.6% of daily web traffic, or at least it was back in June. Google is 48% of daily web traffic. The stats come from Alexa.com, and they reinforce that people are using the Internet. If your program has a presence on the Internet, then it's got to keep up with what's going on in order to maintain credibility, but more importantly, to give people what they need in a way that will reach them. 10% of website visits come from sharing. Sharing also accounts for 31% of referral traffic. Facebook alone accounts for 38%. Twitter and email account for 17% each. People are more likely to click links shared by people they know, which makes sense if you think about it, and are less likely to click links when recommended by people once or twice removed from their friends. And that's why social media, again, is important. Nielsen Company in 2010 did a survey of how people are using, what apps people are most likely to download. Again, these numbers are probably higher now than they were a year ago. But Facebook was the #1 downloaded app or used app for iPhone, BlackBerry, and Windows mobile OSs. It was second to Google Maps on the Android OS. Those numbers have probably flip-flopped several times since then, but I haven't been able to find more current data. But basically what it amounts to is that people are taking their social media with them. And those numbers are even higher when you consider Hispanics and African Americans, because they're more likely to use their phones to access the Internet because they can't afford to have Internet at home, but they prefer to pay for a smartphone. Smartphone sales outpaced PCs in 2010. Manufacturers shipped 100.9 million smartphones to stores around the globe in the last 3 months of 2010 compared to 92.1 million PCs. And that was according to a study released in February of this year by IDC and was reported by CNN Money the same day. So it's much easier to access and read social media, things like Twitter and Facebook, on a mobile device than longer form information like blog posts and web pages. That's another reason why you need to be out there, and you need to be feeding. If you have a web page or you're doing a blog, you need to be also pushing that information out to Twitter and Facebook and places like that. So this is, again, another Pew Internet chart. They have fabulous infographics. And it shows what people do online. And it breaks it out by generation. So you can kind of figure out, where maybe your demographic is age-wise and see what they're using. Among millennials, social networking sites, 80 to 89% of millennials ages 18 to 33 are using social network sites. The numbers drop some as you get older, but 10 to 19% of those 74 and over also use it. I suspect that number is going to keep going up too, because grandparents want to be able to see pictures of their grandkids, and social media is one way to do that. It's a really good way to stay in touch. Reading blogs consistently ranks lower than using social media sites across all generations. So the takeaway, again, is if you're blogging, you should also be syndicating posts through social media channels like Facebook and Twitter. Pew just released some new numbers back at the end of August. 65% of online adults now use social networking sites, and that includes Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, MySpace, but I think that's mostly younger kids, or kids rather than adults. So again, it's not going away. So what technology is your audience using? I think this is really interesting because it shows how deeply embedded the internet has become in our lives. And what Pew did was they pulled out the organizations that people said that they affiliated with. And then they asked them, were they internet users? Are they wirelessly connected? Do they have cell phones? So for example, professional or trade associations, 20% of their survey group is active in a professional or trade association. Of that 20%, 24% are internet users, 27% are wirelessly connected, and 25% have cell phones. But this is interesting breakout, mostly because if you're trying to reach, if you have a particular audience that you're trying to reach, you can perhaps make some assumptions about how they're connected and how well they're connected based on this data. So the case for social media: it's low cost. Most tools are free or inexpensive, which means that there's not really, there's really no cost to try them out. They allow you to become a thought leader and improve your reach. You can build your reputation as an expert in your subject, and you can go where people are and engage them. Web pages are static, tend to be static and reactive. Social media is fluid and it's proactive. That means you're pushing information out for people to find, and you're updating it constantly. Again, you build trust and community with social media. It gives your organization a human voice and brings people of similar interests together. You learn what's important to your customers or your clients, and producing useful content builds loyalty and improves viral marketing. You're more likely to have, if you're putting out a lot of useful content, people are more likely to pass that along, and then other people become familiar with your content who might not have known about it before. Staffing advantages: if you find staff in your organization who are already using the tools and enlist them, that's a great way to get started in a relatively low-cost way. Demographics, again, are in your favor because of all the reasons that I just showed you. So the bottom line is social media is another way to tell your story and make sure that people hear it. Why would you not use free or low-cost marketing tools if they're available to you? One example of how government organizations are using social media is, well, the CDC has actually been getting into social media quite a lot, and trying to remember exactly when this was. I think it was late spring of this year. One of their people did a blog post about emergency preparedness entitled "Preparedness 101 Zombie Apocalypse." That story got picked up by CNN. It got picked up by ABC. It got picked up by all the major news outlets. It got picked up by a lot of newspapers. And really all that they were doing was putting out the information, putting out good information about being prepared for disasters. which people don't normally pay attention to, but they put it in this zombie apocalypse wrapper. It did get them some backlash, but people paid attention to it. And that's a news release that they do every year. And this year, people paid attention. So they put out really good information. They did it in an attention-grabbing way, and they got it out on social media. And they got people to pay attention to their message. So the first step, when you're trying to get going with this, is to create an acceptable use policy, with the caveat that the first question you really need to ask yourself is, do you need an acceptable use policy? I know a lot of you work for government organizations, and in that case, you might. Social media tends to amplify existing behaviors. So if you're having a problem in a particular area already, opening social media up to everybody may amplify that. If you have policies governing the following, you may not need a specific social media policy because you're already covered. If you have policies regarding confidentiality of information, appropriate behavior, like interpersonal conflict harassment policies, a policy about who acts as a spokesperson on behalf of the organization, policies on protection of personal information, on internet use, approvals of web communications, who can post to your web page and what sections they can post to, the use of logo or representation of your agency's brand by outside stakeholders, intellectual property rights and other issues. If you have policies covering those things, you can probably apply those also to your social media policy. Some questions to ask when you're trying to decide if you need one are, if the line between your organizational and personal presence are squishy, what's appropriate conduct? So if you're personally using Facebook or Twitter or something like that, and you start posting things related to your organization, you need to start thinking about whether it's appropriate, what's appropriate. And I know government organizations can be just as touchy about their reputations as Fortune 500 corporations. Does your organization need something more formal than, quote, use common sense? I know a lot of agencies, government agencies, feel more comfortable having a formal policy. Do existing employee guidelines suffice? That goes back to the previous list of policies. And as the organization's leader, if you aren't comfortable or have firsthand experience with social media, how do you trust your staff? And I think, and that's definitely a question that every organization kind of needs to struggle with themselves. So when you're crafting an acceptable use policy, the first thing to do is build on your existing public communications or your existing media policy. And I'm assuming that you have those, or if you don't have something formal, you at least have something informal. Because the bottom line really is that social media is part of an overall public communications strategy. It doesn't exist off by itself in some corner. It needs to be integrated. So look at examples from other similar organizations. There's an online database of social media policies. There's a link to that on the Social Media LibGuide that I developed. And then consider whether the policy applies to volunteers as well as paid staff. Depending on your situation, you may not have to answer that question, but it's always, sometimes it's good to think about that stuff before it happens. I know that some states have P2 intern programs, for example. Do you want your P2 interns to be covered by this policy? So the next thing you need to do is develop a strategy. Again, integrate social media with existing communications and capacity building. It shouldn't exist off by itself somewhere. It should be a part of your overall communications plan. Some big picture questions to ask yourself include, what's my organization's mission? How can social media help me achieve it? Can it help me achieve it? What's the right role for social media in our overall communications effort? And when I talk about social media, I'm not just talking about Twitter and Facebook, even though that's what people think of when they hear social media. Social media also includes social bookmarking tools like Delicious, Blogs, WordPress is my favorite because it has a lot of social components built in, and you can build websites using WordPress and then integrate all of your social media stuff into those social media things into your website as well. Photo and video sharing sites, things like Flickr and YouTube, and geolocation tools like Foursquare. Those are all encompassed by social media. So that's also something to keep in mind. What groups of people might you reach or create through social media? How might you reach more people with your message, whatever that is? How can we help our communities? How do our constituents want to be engaged? Do your constituents use social media? I mean, this might be a time to do a survey and ask them. What's the real cost of making social media work for us? And you have to consider not just the cost of the tools, but the cost of the staff time to come up to speed. Facebook and Twitter are pretty low-key, but if you're going to start blogging, you need to make sure that you have content put up on a regular basis, and that content is not just going up on your website, but I recommend that you also feed it to Facebook and Twitter. You know, how can you do that? Number 6 is how can we use social media to raise money for our cause? And that doesn't really apply to government agencies, but I did this presentation back in June to a group that had a lot of nonprofit organizations in it, and that's a big deal for them. And who is our competition in the social media space, and how can we differentiate our organization from them? So figuring out who in your area is distributing the same information, perhaps, and what makes you different from them. Again, that's less of a problem with government agencies than it is with nonprofits, but it's still something to think about. So after you've gathered data and answered those questions, you need to write a plan. So identify the audience or community you want to engage, outline your objectives for the plan. Some examples might be improve fundraising if you're a nonprofit, broaden the reach of your message, make it easier for your constituents to contact you. I'm sure there are others. There are probably as many objectives as there are different organizations. Decide what tasks need to be done to reach your objectives. So for each task, identify who's going to do it, what success looks like, and how you measure it. And I recommend writing it down because, as with any kind of planning, if you don't write it down, it's really easy to forget that you agreed to do it. And then if you haven't identified who's going to do the work when you write it down, then the work's probably not going to get done. And then finally, you need to evaluate, tweak, and improve. Build in feedback mechanisms throughout the process so that you know whether what you're doing is working. The next thing you do after you've got your plan up and you've written your plan, you've got kind of trying things out, you've got things up and running, you have to measure success. We all love measurement. 6 steps to effective measurement, and this is for social media or for anything else really. Define the goal. Figure out what you want to do. Identify your publics and determine how your social media efforts affect them. Determine the specific indicators by which you will define success. Define your benchmarks, so compare yourself to your peers. Maybe find out what other organizations like yours in other states are doing, for example. Select a tool or a suite of tools. Some of those include web analytics, things like Google Analytics. Those are good for blogs. Facebook Insights, that's Facebook's little statistical package. Clout Score. Clout is a third-party evaluator. Getting a Clout Score is free. You just have to register on the website. And what Clout does is it measures, it doesn't just measure like how many fans you have on Facebook or how many people are following you on Twitter. It measures what people do with your information. Are they, if you're posting things on Twitter, are they retweeting your information? How many people, how many people are they connected to who are doing things with your information? So it's much more comprehensive than just the number of people. It's more of an outcome rather than an output measurement. Surveys, ask your community. Is this working? You know, are you getting what you need from us? And then content analysis. And content analysis has to do with what people are saying about you on the web. So you can set up searches using Google's news alert service for your organization's name and see if people are taking your content and repurposing it, if they're mentioning you in newspapers and press releases and news stories, that kind of thing. And then analyze results, make recommendations, and do it again, because as we know, measurement is a continuous process. And the thing to keep in mind is that all 6 of these steps align with your social media strategy. And the first 3 steps are things that you do when you write your strategy, because, I mean, when you're crafting your strategy, you need to define your goal anyway. So these don't, again, these don't exist in, you know, in their own little worlds. They work together. And that's all I have, and I will be happy to take questions if anybody has any.
Thanks, Laura. So yeah, we're going to open up for questions now. So if you want to use the question box on your screen, you can type a question for Laura. And you know, that was really good information, especially some of the statistics. So, you know, I want to remind everybody that you can go online and get copies of the presentations, like, you know, by tomorrow. That way you can see some of these statistics and in more detail in case you didn't catch them when Laura was going through them. So,
and the LibGuide has links to all of the sources, the statistical sources.
Okay, great. So yeah, the social media LibGuide, if you want to check that out afterwards too. These are some good resources for you. So I'm going to just introduce our second speaker while we're waiting for some questions. Our second speaker is Andy Bray, and he's my colleague here at the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association. And Andy is really involved in Web 2.0 technologies, specifically for waste and materials policy and climate change mitigation, and most recently for a hospitality initiative that NMOA is working on. So Andy's going to go into a little more detail about some policies and guidelines for using social media, some examples of how NMOA is, you know, kind of wading into the pool. So I don't see any questions, Laura, so I think I'm going to move right along to our second presenter, and then you know, we'll take questions for all of the presenters at the end. I know Andy did say that he would accept questions while he's speaking. So if you know, for participants on the call, you know, feel free to use the question box, and he can try to address those while he's speaking or at the very end of his presentation as normal. So Andy, I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter.
Great, thanks, Rachel. All righty, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the policy issues that people likely struggle with as they wade into using social media in their program. You know, I thought it was not that surprising to see at the beginning of the webinar when Rachel was doing the polling that 50% of the folks that responded were blocked from using social media at work, and I'm hoping we could drill down a little bit more on that in the Q&A. But I want to talk about some of the policy issues and talk a little bit about some common sense approaches that I've seen to how to go about using social media in assistance work And then I'm going to, almost a non sequitur, segue into something that we're doing with social media, maybe take it as an example of how you might apply it in a programmatic context. So to start out with, going back to comments Laura made regarding acceptable use policies and considerations, the big question is, why do you need a policy, or do you need a policy? And I think Laura hit on some of the key issues about, whether you even need one if you already have a lot of other policy statements in place to cover things like protection of personal information, appropriate behavior, intellectual property, records retention, and then maybe you're covered. That said, I think that the big question is if having such a policy in place would allow you to move forward in the social media realm, then I think it's worth the while to go ahead and craft that policy and work with those that you need to get that in place. I think sometimes there's blanket blockages on the use of these technologies, and it'd be really, behoove everyone to drill down on that a little bit and come up with maybe a right-sized approach to the use of social media. And as you kind of wade into that, one of the immediate questions is going to be, well, what channels do we need to cover? What's our agency, what's our program looking to use social media for? What types of social media are we considering? Be it the ones that immediately come to mind, Facebook and Twitter. Are we talking about also blogging and YouTube and some of the other channels Laura mentioned? And as you wade into that, those individual channels really bring up some specific considerations about how, what the rules of engagement are related to the use of those specific platforms. And there's something to be said for trying things out and seeing what works. For those policymakers that want some more certainty, it's probably better off to spell out what that's going to look like up front to give them that certainty and transparency for what you're talking about when you say you want to have a Facebook group related to a specific sector initiative that you're doing, or you start to wade into issues like, do we allow postings from group members? What does it look like to quote-unquote moderate the group if we do allow postings, and really creating some clearer picture of what that's going to look like. Then I guess moving from policy to implementation, do you have a plan, or does the policy get down to the level of things like, spelling out roles or responsibilities for who's on first, and what the channels are to get things approved for posting, or if there are channels, what's the frequency of posting? Whose role is it to make sure that the page is being checked on a regular basis? Really kind of more nuts and bolts things than the bigger policy questions that folks often are kind of stonewalled by. And things like, I guess a couple other things related to how you go about implementing your social media work. Some common elements what are some of the common elements that should be part of that work? Are there official expressions that need to go out as you push things out through, be it blogs or Facebook or microblogging? Are there security concerns that need to just be addressed up front to make sure that all the agency IT security measures are being met? So some real kind of practical implementation issues that should be, covered up front. And then, just more about how the policy is going to be executed. So getting back again to the roles and responsibilities. I wanted to kind of segue from that, and before I do, I guess I'd really like to hear more from the folks that are just kind of blanket across the board, blocked from using social media, and to maybe, in the Q&A we can talk a little bit more about that and what has that looked like. Have you made attempts to kind of wade into this and not gotten very far. We'll also love to hear about successes. And in the in the realm of successes, one of the things that I get excited about is a move from thinking about this in terms of rigid, top-level policies that make it pretty challenging to do this kind of outreach and assistance-type work or engagement of assistants, clients, to kind of more common-sense guidance that really, to quote Google, the do no harm, method, where there's the do no harm and then the common sense approach to how you go about thinking about these things. And as Laura mentioned, these are just other ways of pushing things out, other ways of engaging clients, the general public. And so we, as professionals, we always apply a filter to how we do this, how we interact with the public. But just some common sense guidance really can help to kind of spell that out and maybe put people at ease a little bit more about what we're really talking about. Time seems to come up time and again when you mention social media. I don't want to say I blame AOL for that perception, but the early days of people spending time in chat rooms and and the perception that there is a lot of non-productive stuff happening in that space, makes people very mindful of time when we talk about social media. Partly because social is in the title of it, but more so just the perception that people that if it was open to them, they'd spend a lot of time, non-productive time, chatting or socializing, and that's not really the reality when you see social media applied in a professional context. But it's certainly a lingering or a concern, and in some cases a false perception. And things like looking at transparency, that's kind of again a common sense issue of are you identifying yourself, your affiliation? Are you being clear, whether you're speaking on behalf of your agency or speaking as an individual? That's probably more important as you look at some of these social networking platforms where the which hat are you wearing can become grayed if you're not really clear about it, and just the overall tone of the conversation. And I love this visual from EPA that I'm going to pull up next. I think it conveys a picture says a lot. And it really it's one of the better examples I've seen of a common sense approach where it kind of just walks anyone through the filter that you'd use in thinking about either posting on a social networking site or through social media or responding to someone else's post. And what's kind of driving that? It has all those elements in thinking about tone and the nature of the reply, and it also circles back to this policy or the procedural issues. If you do have a web content coordinator or someone akin to that, are you bringing them into the loop or into the process at the right point in time? Or is more as importantly is this filter about does it make sense? And this off-ramp said no, don't respond. It's not appropriate. It's not in scope. It's not a priority. It would take an inordinate amount of time, and maybe it's not on mission with what your organization's trying to accomplish. So I just love this visual and visuals like it that really kind of break the whole process down and kind of walk the staff level folks through kind of a common sense approach. So I wanted to segue now to talk about some work that NUMO is doing, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or share any thoughts more on the policy front with folks in the Q&A. But I wanted to talk a little bit, as follow on to a lot of what Laura was saying. I want to talk a little bit about how NUMOA and NUMOA as a P2RX center is thought about social media, and how we've kind of come at this, and just for 5-10 minutes or so, or 5 minutes or so, to share our experience in this. And we've been talking about social media for a while, and we made a decision kind of early on that whatever we did via social media, we wanted it to be pretty impactful. We wanted to have a pretty large push to try to move an actual issue or bring a community together around a set of issues. We, around the same time of that conversation, there's just been an explosion of work in sustainable lodging. So we kind of melded the two together and have been working with the other P2RF centers to develop the National Sustainable Lodging Network. We're getting ready to do a public launch of this to practitioners nationally next Monday, actually, at the start of P2 week. So we're really excited about that. I thought it was a good time to talk a little bit about why we're doing this and how it came to be. With that explosion of activity in this area, one of the problems that we recognize is that there really wasn't a great way for all these people doing all this good work to connect with one another. In real time, there's plenty of, there were opportunities for people to connect at events and such, but nothing that would allow them to connect in kind of a day-to-day basis and share what was working and what challenges they were facing. And so we thought that creating a national network of those folks would do just that, allow them to connect with one another virtually. And it's really, in our mind, it's really important when you think of how to use social media to think about, up front, what you're trying to accomplish. It's not, well, for a long time now, marketing folks haven't really asked themselves whether or not they're going to have a social media presence, but they're more asked how well they're going to do it. And, it will be later coming to that as assistance providers, particularly those of us that are based within government agencies that have a lot of institutional strictures on the use of these technologies. But we will get there. So then it becomes a question of how well will we do it. And, so I think it's important to plan up front how you're going to use social media and what you're really trying to accomplish, be it raising awareness or just creating new channels for pushing things out, or whether you're actually hoping to use social media to move people further along the sustainability path by creating, creating real-time interactions with people, creating some forums and places where they can go for creative problem solving. There's an element of what we're doing that's certainly going to create a clearinghouse for them to just share resources and share events and information about upcoming events. But we really are emphasizing that virtual networking piece and the ability through the network to connect, either with folks that are in the same geographic area that might be part of a state or a local sustainable lodging program, or maybe around particular issues. Maybe they're looking to advance food waste reduction or diversion or composting within hospitality, and they want to connect with others that are looking to advance that work as well and share ideas. So we're really kind of excited about rolling this out. We found a social networking platform known as Ning that we're using to host the site, and it allows us to really kind of mash up a lot of the different social media channels that we've been talking about. It has blog components to it, it has discussion forums, it has groups, which I mentioned, around particular issues or around state-based programs. The members really make up the network, and those people that come to the conversation will really drive and define what the conversation is, and that's what's kind of exciting about it. Is it's really kind of grassroots, and people will benefit from it, what they bring to it. And we're excited to already have 140 members, and we haven't even had the public launch yet. That's just been kind of an internal soft launch that we did. So we're really hoping that this network will help to increase the adoption of sustainable practice in the lodging area. And really, honestly, even so far, it's been a great experiment of how to use social media, social networking in the professional arena. we've helped to bring some folks along that haven't otherwise been using social media in their personal or professional lives, and we'll continue to do that. It'll continue to bring us along, frankly. We learn new stuff every week. But it's a nice way to kind of have one tent to do under all of this under, and it goes back to my original point of, as you think about how to use social media, think strategically about, really going big and having a coordinated effort. So that's all that I had. If there are any questions, we could take them at the end because I'm a little long on time.
Thanks, Andy. I haven't seen any questions going in. We're actually ahead of schedule, so.
Oh, thanks, Rachel.
If there's anything else you want to talk about or add, you can do that.
I guess I had maybe one more point, or I just wanted to circle back to one or two important points. So just about thinking about if there are roadblocks to this, and it seems like you otherwise have all the policy pieces in place through other policies of your agency. Those are things to point to as you kind of move forward with this, and it's also maybe a way to kind of get that logjam unstuck and use those existing policies kind of as the foundation for a social media policy if you indeed need one to actually be able to move forward with this. But that's all that I have.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our final presenter, sorry, Sarah Haas from the Minnesota Technical Assistance Program. And she is an environmental and public health specialist at MnTAP, and they have just started using social media. They've been doing it for about a year now. So she's going to talk a little bit about their experience using social media for the different sectors or audiences that MnTAP is working with, and kind of, provide some lessons learned. So again, if you want to ask some questions, Sarah said that she would take them as she goes through her presentation, so you can type them into the question box. And I'm going to go ahead, Sarah, and make you the presenter, and so you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel. I am kind of going a different serious on social media work. So I just wanted to let people that might not be familiar with who we are just give a very quick overview of the services that we provide. So that will give you an idea of what it is that we might be using social media for. So we're a technical assistance program. One of our primary funders is the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. We're part of the University of Minnesota, and we have 8 staff that work with backgrounds in engineering and science with various industrial and hospitals and hotels in the state on reducing pollution and increasing energy efficiency. We have 4 key services: site visits that we provide on-site technical assistance. We have a summer intern program. We facilitate internal green teams, and then we have a number of web-based and print-based publications. And the 5th service that we offer under a different umbrella is a materials exchange program, and that is an online business reuse program. And I'm going to be talking about social media approach with both our MnTAP program and our materials exchange. And while they're operated out of the same office, for our social media and marketing purposes, they are 2 separate programs, so I'll be talking about them as such. So we sort of started out with social media on getting our feet wet. like many of you, myself and Crystal Larson, our communication director, had used social media on a personal level. We hadn't used it in a professional setting yet, and so we really just wanted to kind of test the waters and see what we could do. We started out small. We had a LinkedIn account for the MinTap program. And we used this to list current events, our program services, and highlights. And then we used Twitter for the material exchange program. We really felt this would be a great way to reach our material exchange users, which we have about 4,000, to tweet hot items of the day. The purpose of this was to generate traffic on our material exchange program and create a buzz about the various items that were being listed in an effort to increase the speed of which they were exchanged. The initial target audience that we thought we would be sending these messages to were manufacturing clients first and foremost. Those are our target audience for our program. Second would be project partners, and then the materials exchange users. So we didn't really have great results early on. We really saw little to no engagement within the LinkedIn. We attributed that to the fact that we were seeing more of a networking and job seeking going on in the LinkedIn, and we weren't finding a lot of our project partners or our manufacturing clients on there. After 6 months of testing LinkedIn, we have stopped. We have a page still out there, but it's not being updated on a regular basis. With Twitter, we found that we largely had a project partner following. We weren't getting a lot of interest from our material exchange users. We did send direct marketing to them through a monthly email that they were already receiving, just let them know they could now follow us on Twitter. We also didn't see any increased traffic on our exchange as a direct result of our tweeting. This, of course, was discouraging, and because we really did have high hopes for this. On a positive note, we were contacted by a business journal that had seen some of our project results and wanted to write an article on our program in print and send it out to their users. So we took this early testing of the waters to get some lessons learned and apply them to what we're currently doing. And one of the things we learned is it's really important, and you heard this earlier too, that being consistent is key to keeping audiences engaged and attracting those new followers. If you're not active and you're not out there, then no one's really going to want to, get on there. That's a little bit different than when you're doing it for personal use. For example, on my home Facebook page, those are my friends. I don't need to necessarily attract new friends through Facebook. Maybe reconnect, but I'm not trying to bring people into my realm, which is what we were doing on a professional level. Early on, we found it to be so time-consuming that we really weren't consistent in our posting, and it would be infrequent at best. The other thing that we found is that our messaging needed to differ from our other efforts. We were sending a lot of pollution prevention tips and facts and how-to type things, and it really wasn't, we were basically taking our print and web information and making it fit the mold of social media instead of fitting the mold of developing something new for social media. And as I mentioned, the LinkedIn manufacturing audiences just weren't there, and we also weren't seeing our material exchange users. So we thought, well, maybe we need to shift our target and redirect our efforts. I forgot to look at those questions. So that brings us to where we are now. Our current target audience is really potential and past interns, media, project partners, and then manufacturers. We discovered that this could be a tool to get the information about our program out into the public, and then use our other methods to engage the manufacturers in our activities. So with that in mind, we also, I should go back one, I'm sorry. With the target audience, I did want to mention, Laura mentioned it earlier, that having a strategic plan in place like you would for any other marketing plan or project that you're working on, it's really important with social media too. And so after our early lessons, we did redefine our target audience, come up with a strategic plan and the implementation plan, who was going to do it in our office, what were the policies surrounding that, and how were we going to make sure we were consistent. From that, we developed this target audience, and then we equipped our toolbox. The biggest obstacle I find is the timing. It is time-consuming to get your social media updates out there. So we use TweetDeck, and I know we weren't going to go into how-tos and tools, but I am. I'm on the next slide going to go over a little bit about how to use TweetDeck to reduce the time you're spending on social media and also be consistent and have daily updates. It was really a lifesaver, and it's a tool that we use daily on our social media. We also utilize students. So we have student interns, and we do have a communication intern annually. We used our intern to develop the social marketing plan, but also to come up with tweet messages, to do the tweeting, and I mean, this is what the students are doing every day. I mean, they, as you saw in the stats earlier, they just have always grown up with the internet. And then the stock of status updates. We have a spreadsheet whenever an idea comes up, or we have an event, or we're developing a new fact sheet or tip. We create a tweet or a Facebook status update and just throw it in an Excel spreadsheet. So when we're ready or we need a update, we have it available. We don't necessarily have to come up with them on the fly each morning. So, okay, here's TweetDeck. So you can see we have a Materials Exchange Twitter account, which is highlighted. We have a MinTap Twitter account. I have my own personal Facebook page up here, and then the MinTap Facebook page. This is a desktop application, and we have all of our social media sites linked together right here. I can choose to post just on the Materials Exchange Twitter account, or since this isn't live, I can't select it, or I could select the MinTap Twitter account and post to both of them at the same time. I used this for an example when we had our intern presentations a couple weeks ago. I actually selected all of our social media pages and was able to just tweet the same message because we have different audiences. The other nice thing about this is I can see all of my friends here and what Minnesota Exchange friends are posting about and what they're doing. I can easily retweet right from here. I can see and track who's been mentioning our program. And also scheduled updates. So one of the things that's hard to do is, we're often away from our office giving presentations on site at clients to make sure that we're getting those tweets out. What I do is each week I set up my tweets for the week. So I know at least those tweets are going to get out. And then as I have time or I see something interesting come across my desk, I will then tweet. So you can see here that I have a tweet scheduled for today at 9 a.m. And this you can choose, you can edit it if you change your mind or want to add new information. And I actually have them going all the way through Wednesday of next week. I also can follow what other people are saying about our MinTap program and mentions. And then this actually it can have as many columns as you want. So if you keep going, I have our Facebook page, etc. Let's see. Next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about the social media avenues that we're using now. The first one is LinkedIn. Like I said, this is not a current focus. We do plan to reevaluate this in 6 months. Just to see if there's a new way that we could approach this. We don't want to eliminate any of the tools that social media can offer us, but we want to make sure we're using the ones that are most effective for our organization. And so we will evaluate each of these every 6 months to make sure that we're continuing to meet those original goals. We did have sort of an anecdotal benefit of LinkedIn this last intern program season. One of the interns mentioned that he actually received a job interview because he was associated as a MinTap intern on the LinkedIn page, and a couple other interns had mentioned that they were courted by companies because of that. So perhaps that's something we could look at that we, hasn't been our target audience in the past. So for Facebook, this is primarily for the MinTap program, and we use it to recruit new interns and to be in contact with our past current interns. We have 2 sites. One is a fan page that all of you can go like today if you'd like, and that is open to the public. And then we have a closed group that is for interns only, and that the purpose of that page is so they can talk about their intern experience with each other, not company-specific information, but just some basic experience. You know, how do you contact vendors? Sort of like a listserv. We haven't seen a ton of success with that. The fan page, we have 33 likes, and these are mostly project partners. We do update this daily and include information about case studies, intern program events, as well as project partner events. We're not seeing Facebook as a real great avenue for us right now. We receive tracking emails from Facebook, and this lets us know how we're doing. This is, I just copied and pasted an email in here, and you can see that in the last week we had new 8 monthly active users, 33 people like it. That's the same. No new comments on our page, 23 visits this week, and 11 since last week. So that just gives us an idea of where we're at. And then with Twitter, we have the 2 accounts. So we still have the materials exchange, but we've shifted our purpose from just listings to including events, reuse tips, and features of the system. We recently just launched a new materials exchange system, and so this has been a great way to tell people about new features, such as they can now receive alerts for specific items. So that's a useful tool. Ideally, I just kind of have it in my mind that we want to use it for listings, but it seems to be getting a little bit more traffic when we're talking about reuse in general. We have 53 followers, which is not huge, but we started out with 13, so we are seeing that increase, and the majority of those 53 have come on this last few months that we've been actually posting on a regular basis. Surprise, surprise. And then with MinTap, our primary purpose is to get the word out about our services. We were seeing success we were getting media and partner interest in our initial trial of Twitter with MinTap, so we thought, okay, this might be the avenue we want to go down with. Our manufacturers are generally on the plant floor. They're not sitting on their phone or perhaps at a computer, but our project partners are, the media is, and if they're talking about our program, it's going to create a buzz and an avenue for us to get in and get more information to those manufacturers. Right now we have 135 followers. We actually got 4 more this morning, but and they're mostly media and project partners. We do have our interns that follow us, as well as some manufacturers. We use the Twitter stat component of Twitter. It's free. They have a more robust tracking system that you can use for a fee. You can log on to your Twitter account and get the information, or you can get an email. We receive a weekly email. It just lets us know how many followers we have now, how many people we're following, the number of tweets, and then it does this follower prediction of how many over the next 2 weeks, how many new followers or where you'll be at. So that's kind of what we're doing now. I would say we're still in the process of learning how we and social media fit together. We really do now know for sure it can be tough. It's not as easy as your personal Facebook status. I mean, when I'm at home, I can simply put a post, oh, I made a delicious cake. You know, that's what I hope people are interested in. But when you are crafting a message in a professional, it has to be quick, to the point, direct them to your other resources. So one of those pieces is, Laura mentioned, you really want to have identifiable goals. This has been hard for us to determine what are significant goals in social media. Is it the number of followers that we have? I mean, I could have 500 followers, but if they're all second graders, that isn't really significant to our program. So working on developing significant goals for the manufacturing community and technical assistance programs is where we're at right now, is trying to determine that. We attend a lot of events on social media, and I know a lot of people feel it is the marketing answer. You know, we have found that that is not the case for us. It's one key to marketing our services and getting our messages out. It is a tool we will continue to use and continue to develop, but people are still interested in our web resources and our print materials. And right now, people, our clients, are more interested in those two pieces. It does drive traffic to those other media revenues. So we have seen, we did not see this on the Materials Exchange site. People were not taking our tweets and moving to the Materials Exchange website. But for the MinTap account, they were. So we were posting, for example, a case study, just a quick update. Company X implemented, this technology, and they're saving, $100,000 a year, and linked to the website. We could then track and see the traffic on our website in the hour after the post, and we were seeing an increase in traffic. So that's a great avenue to bring people to our longer, in-depth resources. I've mentioned this before, and so has everybody else. There's a lot of social media out there, and it can be really effective, but it needs dedication and it needs a plan. If you're going to start a social media plan, in my opinion, you really need to know where you're going and what you want out of it before you start. And it wouldn't hurt to get familiar with the tools. I had never tweeted before doing it for work. My husband's really into Twitter. I'm not. It was a learning curve for me, and it was a little bit frustrating at first, and now it seems like that was kind of crazy because it's pretty easy to do. But get yourself familiar with the tools and resources out there before you jump in full force. Our next steps is this fall, when Krista returns from maternity leave, we are going to officially launch our social media campaign. We really want to get our message out there that we are on Twitter and Facebook, and this is how you can use those tools to access information about our organization. We also want to gather feedback from the users that we have now and incorporate that into our messaging. We think that they're interested in the services that we have and our case studies. Is that the case? What can we be doing for them to drive more traffic on our site? We did recently do a survey of our entire marketing program at MinTap, including our print media, and did receive a lot of feedback that on social media that people were interested in it. They weren't tech savvy themselves, so it may be a matter just getting people familiar with the tools that they could be using. One thing we thought about is, maybe people are using smartphones when they're on the plant floor. Could we adapt some of the calculators and tools that we have on our website into a mobile application that they could be using right on the floor of their facility? That's way down the road, but something that we're trying to think about. And I probably went real fast. I can talk real fast, especially when there's not an audience looking at me. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I don't have any questions in yet, but I just want to remind everybody, to use the question box. I've had some good feedback from everybody, from people saying great presentation, so that's good. I'm going to just show everyone again where they can access a recording of today's webinar and the PowerPoint presentations. And I also, I want to, we have about 15 minutes left. So I would say, if anybody has any questions for any of the presenters, for Laura, Andy, or Sarah, let us know. I will unmute our three presenters now, so I'm warning you guys. And I thought, maybe we could take a look again at the poll that Namoa initiated at the beginning of this webinar. This was a poll where we asked our participants why they aren't using social media, if they aren't. And, it looks like half of the people that responded can't access it at work. Some people don't have the time. Laura, Andy, or Sarah, do you want to try to respond to this poll at all? I know, Sarah, you talked a little bit about TweetDeck, which I thought was pretty interesting. as a, you know, as a time saver.
Yeah, TweetDeck saved our lives. I mean, not saved our lives literally, but it takes about 10 minutes to get all of our updates in for the week. And then we know we're at least getting those messages out. We can add on and have more, but we know that it's going to be a consistent tweet and Facebook post at least once a day. Our goal is twice a day.
Yeah, and we're using Hootsuite here, and it works. I mean, the interface looks almost identical to TweetDeck, and it does work extremely well, and it allows us to feed from the blogs, that we do, and from other sources. Automatically have things go into our Twitter stream, so that we don't necessarily, we just have to post it in one place, and that can be distributed throughout our several social media channels rather than having to go to each one individually, which takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Hootsuite too.
Well, I would really love to hear from folks on the webinar that aren't allowed to access social media at work. To, if anybody wants to comment on the scope and scale of that, you know, while we're waiting a minute, I'll share a little bit. You know, I was at the National Environmental Information Exchange Network meeting in the spring. They had a great kind of informal roundtable discussion about the use of social media, and they were, you know, trying to refine their thinking about how the network itself might use social media to allow the folks in the Environmental Information Exchange Network to interact with each other. But there are a lot of great minds in the room, you know, some chief information officers from the states, and just, you know, interesting discussion to hear, you know, some states having kind of a blanket block on the use of certain types of social media, to other, you know, the other end of the spectrum, that where they've taken a very kind of nuanced approach, and they've, you know, opened it up to a greater extent, thinking of it as just another way in which people are communicating with the general public or with their clients. And so, you know, it's quite a broad spectrum of approaches, and I'd be interested to hear if anyone wanted to share their experience from their program. You can, if you type it in and you want to remain anonymous, let us know that as well. But, you know, this is a problem. It's a challenge for us as a community moving into this space. You know, some of these broader policy issues, and so we, you know, to the extent we can, we'd like to help explore them and see what might be done to help kind of move the bar a little bit.
Yeah, this is Rachel. I know some of the programs in the NMOA states, they may have a Facebook account or a Twitter account for their specific program, but the employees within that program aren't even allowed to have it. So I know that has sometimes been a problem. You know, it's like, how do you even look at what your own agency is putting out there? You know, you have to use it on your own personal time.
Oh yeah, that's right. Where the blanket policy even applies to them seeing what the agency is putting out through its own Facebook page or through Twitter. Yeah, that's something. You know, in cases like that where there's a single point of access to the stuff, you know, it becomes maybe like traditional web work where, you know, okay, you've got to get in line. You know, you're basically in line for that limited resource, and you've got something you want to put out, but that person has 6 other things that are in line in front of you. And so that can be a problem, certainly for assistance programs that, you know, might not be the top priority at the time. So what do we do to overcome some of those challenges?
Right.
Well, I should say that we had a little short video segment that we had hoped to share with you generally on social media, and just throws a lot of statistics at you. GoToWebinar is still kind of working out how to stream video. It's not directly supported, although they do now have the ability to support video chat. But at any rate, they don't do a great job of streaming media. So if we have time at the end, we can put that up and see if it streams across okay for you. But we wanted to hold it for now. One comment coming in through the control panel is that Vermont A&R now has Tweet, and their staff are restricted to using social media, and to some extent. Oh, they're not. I apologize. They're not restricted in using social media, and Vermont is using it to get the word out through Facebook, to get information out on their governor's awards. So there's a good practical application. And it's kind of governed by, that work's all governed by their communication policy, where it sounds like it. Vicki, clarify if I'm getting this wrong, but their communication policy that covers other things like email. It seems like that's what drives the policies related to using this app, communicating with folks.
If there aren't any comments, Andy, did you want to show a video?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I should let you wrap first, Rachel, in case it's a real bad experiment. But at any rate, we'll give it a shot.
All right. Well, so before we wrap, I just want to thank our three panelists, Laura Barnes, Andy Bray, and Sarah Haas, for preparing the slides and presenting on this topic. I think it was really, really helpful for a lot of people. A reminder again, this webpage here is where you'll get the recording and the PowerPoint presentations. I'm going to stop the recording now and hand over controls to Andy, and so you can just kind of close with this cool video that kind of depicts social media and